Hello there and welcome to Il Salotto Sessions. I am Sara Seravalli, an Italian event organizer with a profound enthusiasm for design and architecture, bringing over 15 years of experience from my work across showrooms in Milan, Paris and London. Fueled by a passion for connecting people in the design world, I founded Design Pop-Up in 2014, a specification-focused event that has since traveled throughout the UK and Ireland. Today, I'm expanding my vision with Il Salotto, a vibrant space, both physical and virtual, dedicated to inspiring meaningful conversations and fostering connections with the design community. Hope you will enjoy my chats. Hello there and welcome to this new episode of Il Salotto Sessions. It's a very exciting day. I'm here with Ewan, Director of Collective Architecture, and Stephen Slevin is the Library Development Coordinator for Renfrewshire Council. Obviously, we are talking about the Paisley Library. So Ewan, Herald Property Awards awarding night. What a night for collective! I think you got shortlisted in every single project you entered, and you came away with 3 prizes. One was Civic House, one was for the beautiful affordable housing development that you've done in Cardonald that we already spoken about here, and obviously the Paisley Library. So what do you get in your coffee in the office? How do you manage to get so much talent and architectural genius in one place?
That's a good question. I think because we're employee-owned, we're quite good at encouraging people to come work for us because people quite like the structure and they like the fact they're going to have a lot of agency in the projects. Yeah, it's about, I think we just try and get the best people in and then we try and all work together and share as much knowledge as possible. And yeah, it's almost like a university sort of course kind of atmosphere, some things in the office.
It's very good.
It's a really good night.
So the Paisley Library has been your 2 babies for both you and Stephen for how many years?
Oh, I'm terrible with dates, but I've got a feeling it must have been, I don't know, about 2017 or something. Maybe I started on it. Yeah, so a long time.
2017 was when we did the initial consultations with public, so it would be about then.
Yeah, so obviously when for the Herald Property Awards, we decided that it was too special to just give you a normal award, so we gave you a special judges award. And I wanted to read what the chair of the judging panel, Tom Barkley, said on the night, because I think it kind of sums up very well how we all felt about the Paisley Library. So he said that, so on his recognition award speech, the way he introduced the Paisley Library was guests in recent start again. Oh, by the way, if you need things to be edited in and out, as you can see, feel free. You can see stop and start as much as you want. I can take everything out. So I'll start again. In recent years, there has often been an awards project that has captured the judges' imagination, sometimes for their bravery and often for the determination of the partners involved to succeed. This year was one of those years. As one of the judges who visited this project, I couldn't fail to be blown away, not just by the technical challenge and architectural solution, but by the human stories that emerged from this venture. Taking a building that dates back to the 1870s and creating a public living room, promoting a safe space for all generations to come together, to play, to learn, or simply to engage. I will leave the last words on the impact of this place to Sophie's mum, a single parent who came up to us during the judging visit to say, I don't know what you're all doing here, but if it's about this place, can I just say it's been a game changer for both me and Sophie. It's safe, it's warm and friendly, and a place where we are both learning. So thank you. And also one of the mums in my daughter's primary school chats, when I was talking about, doing this interview with you guys, he said, oh no, Paisley Library is pure genius. So you guys get the full approval of the mums of Renfrewshire. Stephen, that must feel good. You are very passionate about this building.
It was. I'd said before, when people had been talking about it before, but I was walking around with the judges at the time, and Sophia's mother, Amanda, had stopped us. And when she stopped us, I think there was like 4 of us. Barbara was there from City Deal, and James Doherty was there from, he's our communications director. And she was so sincere with what she was saying, and it was quite quiet at the time. It wasn't a particularly busy time. she was so sincere with what she was saying that every single one of us got a lump in our throat. And then at a later point, I had to do a presentation. One of the things that I thought was most impactful was putting up the quote that Amanda had said at the time. And I don't read the presentations. I normally just talk. You've probably caught that with me before, Sarah. But stupidly, I turned around and tried to read the quote out. And I had to stop like 3 times. And eventually I was kidding on, but it says, has anybody got a hanky in the room? But it really was, it's one of those things, if you want to narrow it down fine enough to get the essence of what we're trying to do, then that quote and the sentiment from Amanda on that day, I don't think you could get any better than that.
It was very incredible to see it, and thank you again very much for showing me around. So, as Tom mentions, this was an 1870s building, Ewan. So, what did you find when you started?
I mean, it was incredibly difficult building to convert, really, and I think Stephen will know it was a bit of a predetermined decision, I think, by the council as part of a bigger strategic sort of reimagining of Paisley, and a really kind of powerful project to try and reinvent the high street by, really celebrating the assets and the history of the buildings and trying to move some of the civic functions into the high street to act as a catalyst for regeneration. So they kind of purchased that building. We'd done a quick feasibility study for them before the main project started and thought it could just about work, just about squeeze everything in. And then they went and bought it. And then we're like, okay, I've got to make this reality now. And I think everybody was slightly unsure how it was going to happen, but all very, very excited about the fact that it was a really kind of beautiful building on the front, but also something that gives quite a lot of freedom to develop, because the ground 2 floors had been used as a shop and had a massive extension at the back, so quite a lot of space in the ground floors and a lot of freedom to do something in the front, because they'd taken the lower 2 floors away in the 50s, and there was a big beam holding up this beautiful facade, and it just gave this kind of opportunity for something really exciting to sort of fill it in. Yeah, quite tricky as a project. There was the stone facade needed a lot of work to restore it. There was lots of asbestos inside. The existing structure was not fit for purpose. So the project actually put in all the engineering to reinforce all the floors to take the loadings of library. Shovel was pretty phenomenal. The engineers did an amazing job. However, yeah, lots of character as well, with the kind of beautiful, we kind of removed all the finishes to reveal the stone, to give that sense of history, and there's old fireplaces in the wall that you can see. And the upper floors, we created that kind of large atrium, so you rise up and get this wonderful sort of ceiling height as well, and this place to rest and reflect. So, a really exciting project.
You are the mind behind that beautiful frontage, aren't you? Those white panels that are the front, that is book pages, I believe.
Yeah, it's like, the kind of idea was almost like take a bookmark and just play with it and fold it. So it was actually, remember the Beast from the East when we were all snowed in? I think it was just when we returned in January, and I just thought, I've got 3 days here. I can't get to the office. I just sat in my room and just spent 2 days just folding bits of paper until I came up with that form, and it was such a nice way to work. I quite like that. You kind of go from paper to computer, and then computer to contractors' fabrication drawings, and that kind of way of mixing media is really nice. And yeah, the idea of sort of folding we tried to carry through as well, and the children's play structure and the reception desk and the book display and all these things. So it's got this kind of design coherence through the building.
And Stephen has, again, go back to what Tom wrote in his presenting award speech. That's something that really struck me as well. We already talked about this. I'm not a library user, unfortunately. Only memory of using the library was Milan 1999 or something like that, and I go to this huge, enormous building, and everything felt very daunting. I was worried I was doing the wrong thing and saying the wrong thing and going to the wrong place, and it was all little cars they have to choose to get these books, and then books everywhere, and quiet, peace and quiet. The experience I had the day I came in and you show me around is completely different. As Tom says, is a living room. So yes, you come in for the books, but in reality, you manage, both of you, to create this space where people are safe and welcome. And it does, as you said yourself, it doesn't matter if you come in and spend the whole day reading your newspaper in there. It's absolutely fine doing so. Why is that so important, this change in the perception and the use of a library?
I think one of the main things with it is that For years, we've tried to cultivate the idea that it's not a place where you're assessed. Don't come in on merit or anything. In so many places that we enter nowadays, that there has to be a reason that you're there. With the library, what we're really looking at is that anybody can come in. It's open to all. It doesn't matter how much money you have. I know I'd said this about the idea of the food banks before when I've talked in the past about this kind of stuff. People will say things like, well, it doesn't cost that much to go and get a coffee. But again, if you can't afford to put food on the table in your house, a coffee is out with your purposes, without your finances. And ultimately, and again, another wee anecdote I always tend to use is that idea of people sleeping in the library. And years ago, that was anathema. We didn't do that. People would say, well, if somebody's coming in to sleep in the library, then they're not using their services. And we still struggle with that idea where a lot of people that aren't familiar with libraries think that all we do are books. And then you say, well, we know you do computers as well. And you say, well, long before we had the whole idea of a warm place, libraries were a warm place for people to come into. They're a place for people to come into and charge devices. They're a place for people to come into and meet up with other people. But again, you've got nothing on you that says that you have to bring something to the party. Effectively, if you want to come and see us, it should be because we want to see you. And the only way you can do that is to make the place as comfortable as possible. Now, where are you more comfortable than in your own house? So if we can make it like you, exactly as you're saying there, Sarah, about the idea of it being like a living room, coming into a living room, then all those barriers start to move away. The idea that you're only in for a short period of time, that used to be a common conception that people had as well, where they would say that you go in, you grab something, you go out. If we give somebody who sits all day, it's not great for our performance indicators because it's really hard to measure. That's one person's in the library. But in terms of the impact that has on that person, the other one that often gets used, and these things get used because they're real things, where somebody will say, if you want to see how important it is for a successful library assistant, library worker, to see value in your job, you only need to look at the fact that there can be times where people come into a library. You may be the only person that member of the public, that patron, that visitor speaks to all week. So you're back to that whole thing again about the qualitative measure of what you're really looking at here. And again, and I would reiterate, nowhere does what libraries do. And that's not just Paisley Central Library, that's all libraries do that nowadays. We all kind of cracked wise to the fact that in terms of us being a service, we're not like other services. We're a service for all that is free, where we can make it free. And in Renfrewshire, we have all of that stuff for free. But equally, the work that was done in the architecture by Ewan and the guys over at Collective and that, the place has got to look nice as well when you're coming into it. And sadly, many library authorities are still stuck with buildings that look exactly as they are. They're buildings from the 60s and the 70s. Whereas we feel as if we've got a building that people, when they come into it, for the comfort and the modernity of how it looks, they feel as if they're maybe in the 2030s and not in the 2020s or even the 2010 or any of that kind of stuff. So see, now you've got me talking again. So
well, I was about to say, I definitely wish my living room was as nice as that floor I really liked. The one with the double height ceiling, that was absolutely stunning. Can you talk us through about the different levels? Because obviously every level works in a different way and talks to different people.
Yeah, well, I think that's what's so unique as an opportunity, is that it had that vertical height and, did have the opportunity to tell a bit of a story, a bit of narrative as you travel in and through and up. Kind of, yeah, it was envisaged a series of kind of living rooms. The kind of ground floor is more of an urban sort of foyer that you're welcomed into, and it's got children's rooms, which are literally tiny rooms as part of the place structure. The first floor is more event space and event rooms, and the upper floor is more reading rooms and study rooms. And kind of all together, yeah, you can find your own little living room that you feel comfortable in. Kind of goes, the kind of noise activities are mostly on the ground floors. It's mostly busy there, but as you rise up the building, gets more and more quiet and contemplative and rewards kind of longer stays. So yeah, it hopefully creates that space for everyone. And I think what was really nice about the project is that Joyce and Stephen were very clear on this kind of social agenda and kind of explaining the demographic and the importance it is for people from the outset, which is why we were able to hopefully kind of meet those demands. It was quite consultative in the early stages. And yeah, we just tried to see through the kind of client's team's vision, really.
Stephen, your favourite place is the teenagers' place, isn't it?
Yeah.
Which is the top floor, which is actually more of a mezzanine than a floor.
Yeah, the area that we put the teenage library in was not what we thought we were going to do. It just wasn't how we planned it. And it's like Ewan says, you start off with the noise generally quietening as you go up. And you think, well, that's not going to work if you put a teenage section right at the very top of the library. And yet it has, because there is almost like a break when it gets to there. And the noise levels are not the stereotypical idea that teenagers are going to be throwing books about and things like that. They're just not like that. And it was one of the things that put a lot of the staff off at the time, where they were turning around saying, well, we don't have a member of staff up there to watch the teenagers. And you were like, well, why? One of the biggest difficulties most library authorities will have is attracting teenagers through their doors. And we particularly struggled with it in Renfrewshire. And it shows the good vision that Joyce, who was the library manager, she'd retired in December there, just as the project was coming into fruition. And it was a vision that she'd had at that point in time to say that would be a good place for it, because maybe that's why we're not getting teenagers in, because there isn't a trust element there. We've had absolutely no problems with any of the teenagers that are coming in, and we get lots of teenagers come in. So the ground floor gets a lot where the children's library is, and the play structure and everything. It gets a lot of the kudos and the kind of the clapping of hands for it. But for me, probably the biggest success story has been that kind of the gallery section that we have. And again, it's a thing that we could never have tried before in any of our other libraries, because we just don't have the space. It's like Ewan says, with the height you've got within it, and the fact that we've got 4 separate sections to work with, it's allowed us to do that. But again, it's my favourite section, I would say, probably because between 25 and 30 years of working in libraries, to me that's probably one of the best success stories I've ever seen, because that's how long I've been trying, and other people in libraries have been trying to get a presence from teenagers. And I think we've got it.
And teenagers playing board games as well, which is a rather lovely sight to see.
I love a board game. Ewan, they talk us through the play structure, because it's really, really amazing, outstanding, and I think so many kids will love it. What was the principle behind it? How did you put it together?
I'm trying to remember how it all came about. I think it'd been...
So this is a key point of this interview, by the way, because the outdoor playground of my daughter's school is a bit rubbish, so I'm trying to find ideas to make it better.
Yeah, well, I'd looked at... Well, I had a student that came in for the summer. I thought, we've got this student for 6 weeks, what we're going to do? And I thought, well, do some precedent research and find out different examples of children's play libraries. And generally, everything that's coming up was a bit predictable and dull, and just kids sitting around in circles and maybe the odd kind of Wendy house. But I did find one library designer, I don't know if it's a Netherlands designer, but they were taking found objects like cable cars and trucks and fitting them out and putting them in libraries, and much more disrupted, sort of exciting, interesting spaces. So I did kind of suggest to Joyce we tried to get the Hillman Imp from the secret collection, but there was no joy in that. But yeah, I kind of basically tasked the student with just come up with sketches of just thinking about play structures and play spaces, and then we developed the concept of it being like a mini high street to celebrate the fact that it was formerly a shop and it had been a sort of tailors and gone through various sort of uses, but mostly to do with kind of clothes and retail. So that was to kind of set the concept, but to make it really work, we collaborated with an artist, Claire Barkley, and we literally got cardboard out, made a kind of quite large-scale model and just ripped up bits of cardboard and stuck them together until we came up with that shape. Already had some of the ideas, like about having the bank seating where you could sit and you could have a book group and you could project films onto a draw-down screen and have a nook underneath. But yeah, the final design resolution was a kind of co-design with a sculptor as well, so that was really nice. And then she developed some artworks that were printed on and had these evocative images which suggest children how they might use the spaces and what uses they might be. So upper floor is more like a residential space with living rooms and kitchens. And when I was there, a child was shouting from the window, asking her mum what sort of house she takes her coffee. which I thought was really nice. And then downstairs, it's more post office and shop sort of scenario. But to have a slide and a climber wall inside it, it's really exciting. It's really quite hard to deliver, but I won't go into the details about children's play regs and all that. But it was a serious learning exercise for us, but it is doable. Yeah. But it did take a lot of courage from the client to be willing to operate that and accept it, because it puts an awful lot of onus on the client and how to manage that and to look after it and make sure it's all hunky-dory for the kids.
Stephen, taking care of it and how to use it, you pointed out rightly so that it doesn't matter if you get foot marks on the climbing frame, right? As long as it gets enjoyed and used and abused, is all part of the plan.
It is kind of, to a degree, it mirrors what Ewan was saying there about the challenge of it and finishing with the fact that it's doable. There is no denying that once it passed hands over to the library services, it's like maybe only 60% there. We're still working on it now. We'll be open 1 year, one complete year in about maybe, what would that be, 3 weeks' time? And we're still changing how we work with the play structure. A lot of it's in the initial period, a lot of it was trying to figure out how staff would interact with the public, because although we call it play structure, a lot of people look at it and they'll say it's soft play. You say, well, no, it's not soft play. And other people will say it's a playground, and it's not a playground. And trying to get across that so that people's enjoyment of the play structure itself measures up to safety can kind of make you look a little jobs worthy. And equally trying to make them understand that it's not just about safety, but it's about everybody being able to use it. So we have it, the way we've set up the height structure in it, again, I won't go into the regulations, but we were given a maximum height. And what we found very quickly was we needed a minimum height to it, because people were lifting babies onto the second floor bit who couldn't walk. Now, the height restriction we put onto the play structure to make it safe for all and make it usable by all the children that we have coming to the children's library meant that you could have 11-year-olds charging about in that space, and a toddler crawling in that space just isn't going to work for us, because it's not big enough to allow the parents to be in if your height restriction is yay-high. And we got a lot of kind of people began to think that you were turning it into too many rules for the play structure. So trying to balance out that thing of making it workable for the staff, for the public, and most importantly for the children, was a big challenge for us. But I think we're nearly full circle with it. I think we're probably maybe, 2 months away from getting a model that I would be confident to pass on to other places for the element of the practicality on site with it. At one point, it felt like we were never going to get there, trying to make it seem like this really enjoyable space without killing it on the basis of that other stuff. But I think we've managed it. I think we've finally managed it after 11 months worth of work on it. And if it was to go somewhere else, we as an authority would be very, very pleased to consult with others to say, here's how to do it in a short amount of time, so that they don't have to take the long path that we did. But now you can't imagine that space without exactly that structure in place.
It's interesting what you say about parents lifting their children up to the top of the step, because through the design of it, it was a suggestion by a consultant. We said that if you make the bottom step 400 millimeters high, then a toddler can't climb up that step, and never once did we think that anybody would actually literally lifting their child up over that hurdle that we'd installed. So there you go.
So 1 year down the line, any other success stories that you would be happy to pass on to other libraries? Say, listen, we've done that and we found out it works really, really well. We strongly suggest you do the same.
You or me?
Both. You start, Stephen. You start from your point of view, and then Ian.
I'll start. The first floor for us is a game changer, complete game changer. I know I was talking about the teenage section and the children's section. What often gets missed is that there's a huge bit in between of people that, at footfall in the first 2 quarters of this year, over the first 2 quarters of last year increased by 223%. We went from having just short of 20,000 to about 65,000 people. That's not all teenagers and children. A lot of that is that kind of middle ground where people are coming in. And the first floor is so versatile for us, the way that it's been designed.
So the first floor is the one you got, the computers, a bit of reading areas, and then there is the 2 rooms at the back that can be put together, whether if you need a bigger space or a smaller space for classes. The day I was there was a baby singing class, wasn't it?
Yeah. It's a community. We've got a community room. We have an IT suite, and we have the main fiction part of the library. And the kind of beauty of the way it's been worked is there are 3 distinct spaces that can be put into one space or 2 spaces. And each of the spaces that we've got are bigger than any other spaces and more versatile than any other spaces we have in any of our other libraries. Individually, they're bigger and better than we have. And what we're finding is that it means where we might be doing in some instances, we're leveling out in terms of the number of events that we're doing. But the way that we're doing these events means that our attendance at events has increased incredibly because we have that versatility. So we don't end up with a thing where we only want space for 25 people being at it, taking up the space that we take up the space for the 95 regs that we have on the first floor. We've got a couple of things coming up quite soon. We've got a CD launch coming up on the 21st of November, where we're going to use the entirety of the first floor for it. And all of a sudden, we've got 95 people attending that. We've got another event the 3rd of December, where we've got 2 authors coming, and it'll be discussion that will go out to the floor, get questions and answer. And we can do that while we're open. Again, that's a thing is not that obvious for us, that we can have a space for 50 to 60 people.
Still be operational on the other.
The way that the panels close off and the way the panels separate out can mean that because they're kind of hanging panels that separate the wall separators and the kind of concertina for the door, we can change these things over in the space of, I would say, certainly between 5 and 10 minutes. Between 5 and 10 minutes, we can section off 3 spaces from 1, 2 spaces from 3, and that's a real game changer for us. And it means that we're, if anything, we're now up for choice in the amount of events that we can do, where previously it was always a case of, well, we might be able to manage this here and we might be able to manage that now. It does mean that Central Library, Paisley Central Library, we have to worry about giving it too much. We have 11 other static libraries, but they are just to put everything into Paisley Central Library because it's the easiest place to do it the way it's been set up. And it's the one that works the best when you're doing the stuff. But we have to be conscious of the fact we have 12 libraries altogether. There's another 11 out there that we have to work to. But I think that says a lot to the success of what was done by the architects. They've made that part of the job very hard for us.
Well done, Ewan.
Oh, thank you.
So, Ian, what challenges did you have to deal with obviously, we've spoken about the state you find the building and the fact that you were going upwards rather than everything on the same level, and there was extensions, and then some of the facade wasn't worth keeping and blah, blah, blah. But what do you think architecturally was the main difficulty or the biggest opportunity?
I think,
or which bit are you most proud of? Since there is plenty to be proud of.
Obviously, very delighted that the Children's Library has worked, because that was, I don't think there's really much like it. I've never really come across a precedent for that sort of thing. So it was, a bit of a journey into the unknown, and it was amazing kind of going through that. I thought it was really quite painful and very, very difficult to get it there. But yeah, it's just having that as a free space for people to take their kids in a library is just pretty wonderful. So really pleased with that. But the kind of facade was quite difficult. It's obviously, a very kind of beautiful high street, lots of listed buildings, and trying to do something quite contemporary and knowing whether it was going to really work, because it had to be, the kind of brief called for it to be iconic and welcoming, and the two can be quite difficult to marry. And also to make it iconic, it has to have maybe a level of solidity to it so that it has a bit of prominence. But you don't want to make it too solid because you want people to really see in and have that kind of open shop front type feeling that's going to draw people in. So that's kind of where the idea of these metal fins came from, so that they can project out into the street. So when you're walking along either side of the high street, it kind of catches your eye, kind of starts maybe bringing your eye to the facade. But when you're in front of it, you can actually look in between them, deep into the plan, and then see what it's all about. And the idea as well that it feels a little bit like a bookshop maybe in the ground floor was something that kind of came through discussions with the client. And also the idea that you can take in your own coffee, your own sandwich, and sit at the window, charge your phones, and you really use it as a very kind of welcoming sort of free space. But I just love the idea that there's so few spaces where you don't have to spend any money and actually can spend time in a city centre. So they're just so valuable for that. There's some really difficult things in that it's completely landlocked. So there's no access to the back. So all the fire escape had to come out the front. So that's why there is 2 doors at the front to the left, which are kind of blanked off. But that was a bit of a pragmatic issue of getting people out for fire. Also, it's really difficult for the contractors to build because there's no access to the rear and the construction access in a pedestrianised high street. So everything had to be managed very, very carefully from them, dropped off early morning, stored in a compound off-site and all these things. So yeah, there's a lot of extremely difficult pragmatic issues to solve. But yeah. The steelwork itself has actually brought in handleable sections, and they actually hoisted up individually the steel up the centre of the lift shaft, which is quite inspiring to watch, and then manually moved it around the building. So
I'm sure the contractor loved you.
We're not happy, really. Right? I don't think we're entirely to blame.
Stephen, you said this is very much of a work in progress. After 10 months, you only finally finding out the best way to make use of the place structure. And I remember when I was there, you said something very similar to the signage of the building, for example, and then there were differences between what the team of collective architecture put on a floor plan and what actually is the real use of the space. So all of a sudden, things need to be on wheels, they need a certain height. So there's been quite a lot of thought into how people are going to use this space. How is that? How much from the original idea things change and they're still changing? Because you obviously have immense experience. So you and your predecessor Joyce were capable of giving instructions precise enough to collective rather than have more of their input. So how much things are changing? How many more tweaks do you need to give to the space?
In terms of the space itself, I mean, the stuff that the collective put in, the good thing is that particularly in the shelving, when we looked at the shelving stuff, the shelving was put down. It kind of felt that we'd not almost put the shelving down to fit the space. Unlike anything else, when you move into a thing, and that's where your speciality is, you start thinking about, if I'm here with patrons, if members of the public are in here using the building, how will they use the building? Because how did they use the previous buildings? What was wrong with previous buildings that we'd had that we couldn't fix? Because, for an instance, the shelving was static. What can we do differently? And this is the kind of nerdy stuff that the people in libraries are dying to be able to do. Give me a kind of tabula rasa, give me a blank slate, and we'll move the stuff about. Unfortunately, what Joyce and me had done with it, certainly we started off on the second floor with all the shelving sitting in a kind of vented rows. And we were so excited to get the books on the shelves that we just went with it and put all the books on the shelves, stepped back from it. The Joyce and me are both like non-fiction nerds, so we would start on the non-fiction floor. And immediately said, this isn't going to work. We haven't thought this out properly. The tables aren't going to sit properly because the consultation says that people want to sit together. They want to be able to study on tables. They don't want them separated up. And then we started thinking about things like, well, these shelves are quite high. And although when they don't have any books on them, you see clear run-throughs and you can see all the benefit of the actual space you're working in, because they're big, long rows. And that we turned all the stuff around so that you could see straight through from the back of the library all the way straight through to the beautiful windows at the front of the library, which you couldn't do in we'd done the original plan. But thankfully, we had standard in libraries. We did have all the shelving in the middle on wheels. It still wasn't as easy as it could have been if we just moved all the stuff about without putting all the books back onto them. But gradually, that's what we ended up doing. We moved our way down from that second floor onto the first floor, did the same thing. So none of the shelving, other than, no, not even the two big bits, the two beautiful bespoke pieces of shelving that Ewan and the team got commissioned for us, none of it's where it was in the plans. But I think that's an expectation that when you get the thing in, it's a bit like a house. You move into a new house and then you move stuff about. As long as the main parts have been done correctly, to complement what you're doing in the middle, then you're fine with the stuff. But the signage is a kind of funny thing. When we're bringing the signage in just now, it's taken us a year to get consultations about the signage correct, and so that we're happy with it. Because most of the stuff that we did with the signage when we originally did it, we're having to change it. We're having to change at least 50% of what we did. Most people that were coming into the library were congregating on the first floor. So they come into the ground floor, the ground floor they would come into. And the ground floor was always heaving. It was absolutely stowed in the first few weeks to maybe month that we had it before we closed down for the festive break. And we couldn't quite figure it out. We couldn't see. We thought, well, it's a great space. It's got the children's library in it. It's fantastic. Why wouldn't you want to be in the ground floor? Stories started coming back from library staff where people were saying to the library staff, it's a great library you've got here. Just thought it might be bigger. And after the maybe third or fourth time that came in, library staff had said that to us. We were like, this can't be right. What do they mean it could be bigger? It's enormous. We've never had a library this big on the size of one of these floors, never mind four. And that's what it was. People didn't realise that even though there's lifts in the libraries, there's glass panels that you can see stairs through, they didn't realise there were another 3 floors above the ground floor. So we had to change all of the signing that we'd done on that. And like I say, the signs is only just going to be going in the more permanent sign. But again, with signage, what we need to be careful about is that nothing stays the same. So right now, our first floor is where we put the adult fiction stock, and our second floor is where we put the adult non-fiction stock, and the top is where we have the teenage. This time next year, that might not be the case. So we have to be a bit generic with how we sign stuff, because libraries change stuff around all the time. We are a genuine movable feast. The biggest thing that we've got coming up is that we're finally getting around to getting the roof terrace, the furniture set up for the roof terrace, which has been a little bit of a challenge. But I think that's been more a communication internally within Renfrewshire Council and us in One Ren. That was nothing to do with how Collective had done the stuff. It was a misunderstanding about what the space was going to be used for. And what effectively we're looking to use the space for is for the second floor to spill out, for people to sit and quietly read, sit in the sun, shine. God knows how often we get that in Paisley, but I'm sure we will in the summer. And I think originally that there was a concern that we'd be using that for a kind of event space. And now that we've finally identified it, no, that was never our intention. We just wanted to be where people can sit outside, which again, out of 12 libraries and 100 and nearly 50 years of library services in Renfrewshire, we've never really had an outside space. And so that for us will be a bit of a game changer. I'm really looking forward to seeing what next spring and summer will be like for that.
So as a building, it really contributes to well-being on so many different levels. You know, we discussed about it's a welcoming space, it's a place where you can learn, it's a place where you can create a community, it's a place where you're safe, and is also a place, you know, being outside, as Peter Kerr from Atelier Tern taught us, being outside for 50 minutes at lunchtime every day, even if it's not sunny, is so beneficial for your physical health. So you're going to be better than the hospital. You're going to save the NHS.
You're doing better than that quote we had earlier. Good to have you hanging about in the library centre.
Absolutely loved it. Ewan, would you do it again?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think you asked earlier about lessons learned, and what I think is really good about this sort of discussion is that we rarely get to hear about how buildings actually work. You kind of work on them for years, you get to completion day, sign it off, client moves in, and that's that's generally it. And you don't really get any feedback unless you make some particular pains to do some occupancy interviews or these things. So yeah, the fact we're getting this feedback is absolutely brilliant. I mean, the furniture one was a good lessons learned, because I visited quite a lot of libraries, and generally you got the sense that an architect had taken quite a lot of care in the envelope and shell, and then just handed over the entire interior to a shelving manufacturer to come up with the layout themselves. So we were quite keen to not let that happen and have some sort of design continuity. But I think in our efforts to try and get the linear meters of shelving in, we just put them all a little bit too close together. But fortunately, they were all on wheels. And yeah, my first trip in, I was like, this is absolutely nothing like that. Imagine it was. And also it had a Doctor Who exhibition in it as well, which I didn't expect to see. So yeah, in some ways, that I might have had issues with that when I was a lot younger, but now I really quite like seeing how buildings are occupied and used, and you've got to let your buildings be occupied. And the fact that people, immediately they were making decisions to put exhibitions in and rearrange stuff and have events in the first floor main space is brilliant to see. So yeah.
So is there any other building you've done that you want me to interview you on, so it gives me an opportunity to go see it and then you can hear about how it's being lived?
I mean, there are, but yeah, there's one in particular that I find really interesting, which is a actual centre for alcoholics with brain damage from drinking too much, called alcohol-related brain damage, and it was a bit of a design exercise and rethinking the kind of care model and giving them independent studios. And I think it works really well, but it'd be nice to go back after sort of 10 years and just see if it's still working for them.
Okay. So, I'm on that. I love architecture, so any excuse to go see a beautiful building, happy days. Right, gentlemen, thank you very much. I really enjoyed it, and congratulations again. Ewan, for all the awards. As I said, collective architecture on the night was like Taylor Swift at the Grammys. And Stephen, congratulations again for helping building and managing such a spectacular space and a very important space.
Great, thank you.
Thank you very much, guys. Thank you very much for listening to Il Salotto Sessions. If you enjoyed the chat, please make sure you share with your friends and follow our podcast on Spotify or Apple Podcast. For more information on our events, please visit ilsalotto.design and designpopup.com. You can also find us on Instagram _designpopup and Il Salotto Glasgow, as well as LinkedIn. Should you have any feedback, questions or suggestions, please do get in touch. We would love to hear from you. Thank you.